This tremendous bang when the ship really shuddered, and you could feel it scraping along something. And we all looked at each other and went, "Oh my God, you know what's happened?"
Now this is Cape Jackson Radio, Cape Jackson Radio. To any vessel in the area who may be able to assist, we have a problem in Port Gore. The Russian liner is in trouble in Port Gore.
You could hear the alarm bells ringing in the crew quarters, and the Russian crew were coming up from the outside stairways with their life jackets on.
Chris was in the shower and I was getting ready for his shave when it happened. The ship continued on for a while and everything seemed to be all right. Then the announcement came over the PA system saying that there was a slight water intrusion in the lower deck. But everything is okay, as we have a good captain and a good crew, and they fix. The passengers could go up to the Bolshoi Lounge to enjoy the concert.
What were you doing at the time the ship hit the rock?
I was on the loo.
Are you just going to come up towards us and then we'll raft up with Liz when she gets rid of the water out of this life raft, over?
It's called the Triona, and he has been standing by for the last 2 days.
You went between the lighthouse and the shore, and you went over the period of over the patch of white water.
They come over the white water, for sure. As anyone knows, if it's white water, you don't go and even bloody rowboat.
So you couldn't save any of your belongings?
Oh no, I went down to get the wine, that's what I got, the wine.
We recovered one elderly Australian gentleman who is now on board Taupo, and we assisted in rounding up the life rafts and the lifeboats from the vessel.
Your attention, you can leave the vessel from the port side. Leave the vessel from the port side. There is no run.
Yeah, okay, we'll stand by one, over.
The crew of the sunken vessel, 600 have been picked up, about 600 have been picked up. It is requested that all vessels carry on in search for other life raft
A marine survey round Cape Jackson was done last century. It shows the rocks clearly, but no copy was on board the Lermontov. Ironically, inside the lighthouse are 3 channels deep enough for her. She missed all of them. The Navigator's Bible used to print a warning, but it's been deleted from later editions.
The tidal streams around Cape Jackson are rapid, and there is but little slack water. Several vessels have met with accidents, principally due to the rapidity and irregular direction of the tidal streams when using the passage between Cape Jackson and Jackson Head. Vessels should not use this passage.
This is the pilot who did, Captain Don Jamison. He was found responsible for the sinking by the official inquiry, which was held behind closed doors. The rocks tore open her port side, below the waterline. The captain took over and changed course to take her into shallow water.
Our next instructions were to get life jackets on them wherever possible and to get them to lie on the floor or to hold on because the captain was going to try and run the ship aground. And then that's what we were doing. Everybody was sort of lying on the floor, hanging onto tables, hanging onto posts, waiting for this crash that never actually came.
She didn't make it to shore. Seawater short-circuited the electrics, the engines gave up, the wind took over and blew her back out into the bay, where she sank. Not many people live in the Marlborough Sounds. Apart from farming, most of them depend on fishing and tourism for their livelihood. The one thing that could be a disaster for the whole district is oil spillage. There's around 1,500 tons of oil in the Lermontov's tanks. It'll all have to be pumped out. The team of divers who'll tackle the job meet on board a duplicate of the Lermontov, the Alexandra Pushkin, which happens to be in New Zealand waters. When they see how she's built, they'll know what to expect in the wreck.
Dirty water.
Ian Lockley's a salvage expert based in Fiji. He secured the contract ahead of the big boys in Europe.
We have a couple of important points to concentrate on, and that is to remove or open the safes on the vessel. Naturally, they'd like them back. There are valuables inside. So part of the team will be concentrating on that initially. Part of the team will be concentrating on opening the ship up safely. It may be that we opt to open up a section of the ship to remove one of the safes. We don't have the keys to one of the safes at the moment. The ship was evacuated so quickly that no regard was given to the security of the money at a later date. It was concentrating on getting the people off, which, as we all know, they did very efficiently. And we know where the key is on the ship, but are we going to be able to find that key that was in a cupboard, in a cabin that's now on its side with the doors either jammed up or in an unusual situation? We don't know. There are many things. So the prime purpose today now is going to be, let's go to the top deck, which are the engine room skylights here with the engineer. Look down those skylights and we'll be looking into the cabin that we're going to be swimming into. And there's only as many pins in this as there are in the other ones. Yeah. These other ones you've got to take hydraulic rams off. This is only a very small one. Yeah. So it has moved a little, but it's almost level, isn't it, I think you said?
Yeah, it's almost level. It has dropped a little at the stern.
Right.
But whether it's still going down or not, it went down about 1.2 metres at the stern, so
it is slightly stern heavy at present,
yeah,
then.
But it's not a great deal.
No, but it's enough to give a corner to a tank.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not concerned about the starboard side. Just looking aft and the port side in the tunnel.
Yeah. Joanne Guerd is in charge of the diving. His Australian companies joined up with Lockley and Mackay Shipping of Auckland to salvage the oil.
And photograph those boxes where the pipes and manifoldings together.
The salvage vessel's called the Little Mermaid. She'll lie to here in all weather 24 hours a day for 3 months. The Cook Strait weather's pretty unpredictable, and the Little Mermaid's got to hold her exact position directly over the Lermontov. So she takes advantage of the biggest anchor available, the wreck itself. This is about the size of it. Imagine Auckland, the biggest city in New Zealand. If anyone was silly enough to stand the Lermontov on end in the main street, she'd tower 8 stories above the tallest building. Big, eh? The South Pacific's attracted lots of European romantics. The great Russian poet didn't make it in his 19th century lifetime. Mikhail Lermontov. As a 20th century effigy, he didn't do too well either.
Then the announcement came over the PA system saying that there was a slight water intrusion in the lower deck, but everything is okay.
The slight water intrusion was caused by a gash in the ship's port side 40 feet long. The rocks tore through 3 watertight bulkheads. She had to sink.
Tremendous bang. You could really feel the ship hit something, and you could feel it scraping along. And immediately after the bang, all this strip lighting in our office.
Somewhere down here floats the body of a Russian crew member. This is the Davy Jones locker the divers will work in. Luxury cruise ships now a 48-story garbage can that's been through an earthquake. Festering, rotting, a playground for scavenging fish. This is a decompression diving bell, arriving from Fiji. It was designed and built by Ian Lockley. It'll be sent down to hang above the wreck, like an upturned jar in a sink full of water.
Okay, the hook come off. You take the hook off. Let it go a little bit, mate. Not too much.
The divers are working as deep as 120 feet. The deeper you go, the greater the pressure. Under pressure, your bloodstream absorbs nitrogen out of the air. If you come straight up to the surface, there's a sudden release of pressure, like taking the cap off a soft drink bottle. The gas dissolved in your bloodstream turns to bubbles, and they move. What you suffer as a result is called the bends. If a bubble gets into your spinal column, it paralyzes you. If one gets into your brain, it kills you. The answer is to decrease the pressure gradually, and that's what the diving bell's for. They'll stay in it for up to 3 hours, depending how deep they've been and for how long. There was nothing Mickey Mouse about this operation, but even so, 3 divers suffered minor bends. One of them will never dive again. Some of the teams prefer to decompress more quickly. Instead of using the bell, they stop for just a few minutes at measured stages on the way up. Just long enough to get rid of a bit of the gas out of their blood so they won't die when they hit the deck. Then they head for the decompression chamber on board the Little Mermaid.
Divers are now coming inboard. The divers are now coming inboard. Make sure the chamber is ready.
Even though they've come up gradually, they've still only got 5 minutes to get into the chamber before they get the bends.
Big googly on your beard. Big googly all over your body now.
2.5 minutes to go.
Ray's got grease on it.
You got a rag? I've got a little bit on my wrist.
No, don't worry about it, that's not.
Okay, shut the door.
Okay, R2 is on.
In here they breathe pure oxygen. That's why it's quicker than using the bell. The pressure's the equivalent of 40 feet underwater. One of the things you can't do in pure oxygen is smoke. They can't eat either, or talk much. And they're not really into knitting.
Okay.
Yep, yeah.
The length of that tank beyond the identification mark that Doug knows where is 9 metres, so there's no problem there. We can go anywhere between...
Joe Ngueda and the team study the plans provided by the Russian owners to work out routes for deep penetration dives. Most of the divers had never worked in a ship this big.
You understand that, Doug?
Their gear's a state-of-the-art version of the old copper helmet. The bundle of spaghetti they call their umbilical supplies air, of course. Hot water so they won't freeze down there. Communications with the surface. And the vital depth gauge. The umbilical's their only link with the world above. When they're not underwater, they take it in turns to play dive controller.
Diver leading bottom.
Right, yeah, the dive controllers, they're basically just to give you an idea of where you're going and where you are in reference to other points, and relay messages from one diver to the other, because we can't actually speak to each other down there.
Diver 2, Diver 1 has grease and oil all over his mask, cannot see at all. When he gets to clearer water, he will have no visibility. Repeat, he will have no visibility. You will have to guide him through. Do you copy?
The communication system, while it is very good, the pressure that you're under changes your vocal cords, of course, and your voice does not come through very clearly to him.
Plenty of fish down here. Do you want some for dinner?
The guy on the bottom has no idea of how deep he is. You have no idea how long you've been down. Often you don't necessarily have a complete picture of where you are. You simply know that you've gone through this door and along this passageway. The guy up top's got the maps in front of him, the ship's charts and so on. He knows exactly where you are. You don't need to carry that picture down there. You can afford to concentrate on the job that you're doing and just, well, literally place your life in his hands.
Stand by, Diver 1. We're having trouble with a hot water unit on deck. Sorry. You've just burnt Joe's balls, Case. Will you turn the heater down a bit?
Some of the tanks have already been located and drilled, but there's dozens of them all over the ship. They have to grope along corridors and passages, up and down companionways to find them, then locate the top of each tank. At the weird angle the ship's lying on, that's where the oil will be floating. The hull itself forms a wall of some tanks. They drill through it and install flanges to fit valves on the outside.
Right, hold it at that. Rightio, now take up slack Diver 1. Take up more slack Diver 1.
I think at all times, you know, I'm perhaps a little on edge. I'm generally relaxed in the water, but I think the main difference with it from the previous diving I've had is it's so vast. You know, it's bloody big in there. It's really big. And you can get inside there and you're in a great cavern such as the engine room, and it's dark and you can't see anything, and our heart's beating fast. You know, it's very easy to get lost.
I've never been in one so massive, so extensive. You swim down these massive areas where you've got 6 stories just to get to the bottom of the engine room alone. Everything's topsy-turvy. You've got the roof where the floor is and the floor where the roof should be. You've got bulkheads collapsing. It's truly a real scary experience.
At tea one night, we were all sitting around discussing the job, and I said to the guys, hands up all those who weren't scared today, and no hands went up. It's not really a matter of being scared, it's a matter of being super aware and super conscious of what you're running into, what you could run into.
Half the time the visibility is so little that you actually can't focus your eyes that closely. So it's a case of turn the torch off and concentrate on your fingers. If the torch is on and you've got a little bit of light there, there's always part of your brain is trying to concentrate on what your eyes can see. You turn the torch off, all your concentration goes into your fingers, and it actually makes the job easier.
You've got your light cables, you've got air hoses, sometimes 2 air hoses, 2 diver umbilicals, a light cord. So there's a lot of potential snagging that goes on. And particularly if you're working in a deep place or doing a deep penetration into the ship, you've got a lot of umbilical out in all these places where it can snag up and foul up. You'll be heading towards the work site and all of a sudden, bang, you'll get pulled up short, so your umbilical's snagged, and the only thing you can do about it is retrace your steps, find out where the snag is, undo it, maybe pull through a little bit more umbilical, then go back to where you left off and start again. Bang, it happens again, back you go, clear it. But I don't get frightened about that, simply because as long as you've got air coming, and we all know when we're down there that no matter what stuff-ups there are, no matter what happens, as long as that air keeps coming down the hose, then you're safe.
The drums, the pieces of pipe and all the tools, they've all got just a covering of oil over them as the water level has risen, of course, with a layer of oil sitting on top of the water. Every piece of machinery it's gone past has then ended up with a deposit of oil over the top of it. And the problem I had today with my face mask, at some stage down there clambering around, I got oil all over the face mask, and it wasn't for about 10 minutes or so when I went to come up into clean water that I realised I couldn't see anymore. You've got a problem then. You've got oil all over your gloves, you've got no clean rags down there, there's no way you can clear a face mask. You sort of learn a lot about yourself getting inside the ship. You realise that you are or you aren't the sort of person who can operate with no visibility in a confined space. I suppose it's the old, learning about yourself. The ultimate battle is against yourself.
The whole operation's expensive, but the Russians are paying for everything.
Sliced peach. 10 tins fruit salad. 10 tins apricot. 5 bottles Andy. 10 tins pineapple. 6 cartons of just juice. 10 tins sampler biscuits. 10 tins fruit juice.
Tony Baker's been farming here at Cape Jackson for 20 years. Like most of the district, he's been deeply involved ever since the night of the shipwreck. Besides the farm, he and his wife Betty run the local fisherman's radio.
Our son David, with a cousin, went to the top of the hill here and actually saw the vessel making its way in fits and starts up into Port Gore. And they watched it for about 20 minutes, half an hour, until it actually disappeared up around the area of Black Head in Port Gore. And he came back to us here and told us that, in his opinion, the vessel was almost bound to sink. And although there'd been no official rescue organised, we took it on ourselves to start ringing up some of our local fishermen.
Hello, Nimrod. Cape Jackson Radio calling Nimrod. You on the air, David? The biggest frustration, of course, was knowing the situation and not being able to get the search and rescue to come in. Of course, they weren't able to come in because there was never an official Mayday. And Tony and I decided that perhaps we ought to alert our local boys. Cape Jackson, Nimrod, how do you read there? I think possibly there was 23 small fishing boats or private boats offered to go into Port Gore and assist.
When we arrived there, it was dark. Raining and quite a strong breeze of southerly. We went alongside the vessel, and people were coming out of 2 gangways, being loaded into lifeboats. The cruise liner was listing very heavily. There's been a lot of criticism about the way the Russian crew handled the situation, but I disagree with most of what was said, because I was there and I saw any of the lifeboats and life rafts that were coming away from the stricken vessel were well manned with Russian crew. Passengers were being well looked after, and in my opinion the Russian crew did a very good job in getting the passengers off.
It was lack of communication, I think, with the vessel, and I think the captain just didn't want to admit that his boat was going to go down. I think that was half the trouble.
There was a lot of criticism, particularly of the life-saving equipment. The media quoted a Royal New Zealand naval officer as their source.
I'm Commander Jerry Power, Royal New Zealand Navy. As far as press reports at the time of the sinking, quoting one of our officers as being critical of the emergency equipment carried on board the Lermontov, we've established that, in fact, the officer gave no such interview, and therefore the report is totally unfounded.
But the locals towed in many of the Russian lifeboats. They saw the equipment for themselves.
I've been running my own boat building business in Picton for a number of years now. The Minister of Transport, Mr Preble, has issued a statement saying that the criticism regarding the life-saving gear is unfounded. This is simply not true in my opinion. I found that in the lifeboats, the bilge pumps on most of them were not operative. They were seized up, frozen, handles were missing on them. One particular bilge pump, the suction line had been cut off and wasn't even there. One of the lifeboats had a radio shack in the bow of it. Had a hole in it about 1.5 inches long by around about 3/8, where the battery acid had fizzed down through the aluminium. One of the enclosed boats had the exhaust disconnected from the hull and was discharging into the interior of the boat, which would have asphyxiated the people inside the boat. At the same time, the open hole in the side of the boat was taking in water. The life jackets that I picked up that night down in Port Gore, every time we grabbed hold of one, it fell to pieces. The material was rotten around the polystyrene, and you could just pull it off by hand, just grab hold of pieces of cloth and just tear it across. And just about all the life jackets that I brought to town were in very much the same condition. The water containers in the boats had been painted into place. They hadn't been serviced for a long time, and I would estimate that 90% of them, the tops were full of holes. Some of the containers were empty, some were split the full length, and it was hard to find a container that was in good condition. The basic design of the equipment was very standard, very sound. There'd been no maintenance done for a period of time, long period of time on most of the gear. And I feel, in my opinion, if the boat had sunk at Cape Jackson where it hit, there would have been a massive loss of life.
The Transport Minister's press statement reads, "Allegations made subsequently concerning deficiencies in the Lermontov's life-saving appliances have not been borne out by the evidence presented to the inquiry." Not much of the Russian evidence was made available to the public. Faced with a wall of silence, speculation ran riot. Not only thousands of litres of fuel oil went down with the ship, but also everyone's personal belongings, the little needs and treasures people take with them on a holiday at sea. The shore excursions officer on the Lermontov was Jean Anderson. She's now working as a croupier on a floating casino off the New Zealand coast. She lost everything, like the hundreds of others.
I was in cabin 212 on Promenade Deck, a 3-berth cabin which had sole occupancy, and I virtually had everything I own on board the ship, which of course I've lost. All I had time to do was to get into the cabin and just grab my handbag, which I'd put my jewellery into. But I lost a lot of other jewellery which was in another case, which I was waiting to take off to have repaired. Gold chains, a string of pearls, gold Krugerrand, Cartier lighter. I lost my brand new tennis racket, which I hadn't even taken out of the case. Of course, all my clothes, and I had a lot of clothes because I've been at sea for 10 years. I had over 21 cocktail dresses. My gold Tissot watch, which my husband gave me. my music, which was important to me. It was all my tapes, my favourite tapes, my cassette, all my photos from the ship last year and from various other ships that I've worked on. Antique rings, my birthday presents and Christmas presents from the staff, my family. And really just about everything I own, my shoes, underwear, swimming gear, my diving gear. I love diving and I had my personal diving gear on board. The photographs. I grabbed a few of the photographs on the wall, but that's all I saved.
Port Gore has very changeable weather, but the divers carry on regardless, sometimes 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, often till late at night, come rain or shine.
Divers leaving the 30-foot mark on their way to the surface. Take up slack divers 1 and 2.
An operation like this costs the Russians an arm and a leg. The priority is to get the oil out, even though it's worth next to nothing. They can't afford to spend time hunting for personal trinkets. But there are also ship's safes on board, and one of them's got many thousands of dollars in it.
The excursion office, which I shared with the cashier, is on promenade deck, very close to my cabin. And the ship's safe is in that office. The office is surrounded by a strong wire grill that pulls around. And in the safe was virtually all the ship's takings, money from bingo, money from the horse racing, all the kind of things, the activities on board the ship, money to pay staff wages, and all my cash from the excursion takings, which was quite considerable. There was, I think, around about $100,000 in travellers' cheques and cash and bank card in the safe, which is in that office, which of course has been lost. It's gone down with the ship.
Diver 1. Do you want that heavy rope disconnected from the lift bag?
I want the heavy rope.
Roger, but you don't want it tied onto the lift bag at this stage.
Negative.
Roger that.
I am unable to move the safe enough to get the net around it.
Roger.
I will have to lash the safe with the heavy rope.
Roger, the one you've got down there is not heavy enough?
I cannot use the net.
Are you therefore going to need another heavy rope?
The safe is too heavy to move.
Oh, you're pretty strong, Ray.
You ask Diver 2 if he has the pinch bar.
Diver 2, do you have the pinch bar?
Roger.
Roger.
Okay, roger that. You're all set to go, are you, Joe?
Roger.
Yeah, that's a roger. Walkateri's all set to go.
Give me a bit of perk here.
Yes, they have the weight on the line.
Are you going to pick the safe up on the lift bag or just pull it straight up onto the barge with the crane?
I'm not going to pick it up. Happening.
Diver 2, make sure your umbilical and Diver 1s are clear from under the safe.
Yeah, okay.
Roger, roger. Umbilicals are clear.
Right, get the splurge going.
Roger, stand by. Giving you air now. Air's on. Slack off on the hauling line, the safe's coming up.
Yeah, it's just coming out of the water now, Doug. Ease away. Marty, let it come up. Yep. Keep it coming. And if Marty grabs the blue line.
But when the divers do fetch up the money box, they've got to hand it over. None of them managed to find the key down below, hence the expression safe on deck. The well-travelled piggy bank heads for Picton where the owners are waiting. It takes the same shortcut inside the lighthouse as the Lermontov did.
So it's one you're familiar with, then it won't be too hard to crack.
Well, hopefully, it's depending on what the salt water's done to the bolt work.
Right.
The lock and bolt work.
Yes.
Is how easy it's going to come undone.
Right.
They've hired an honest-to-goodness safecracker. security's tight now the loot's within reach. To make sure no shady characters take the opportunity to pick up a few tips, they rig a tarpaulin screen. And that's all there is to it. Simple, eh?
Good condition, too. Yep, beauty. The other one is the blue. That's bingo.
Oh, bingo takings.
That's the bingo box. Blue bingo box.
Just read it out.
Diver one, make it hot.
The easiest way to get at some of the oil tanks is to cut a hole in the side.
When I'm given a job, that is the only thing really that's in my mind. Now, if, for example, I was here in a sport diving capacity, I would get immense pleasure from having a look at the fittings, and there's always the thought of treasure in the back of your mind, you know, a bit of a cash box or a safe or something valuable down there. While I've been on this job, there's been no pleasure in that sense. So, okay, I could probably swim past a Chubb safe with $100,000 in it and maybe not even notice that it was there. I'm going to do a job. That's the only thing I'm thinking about.
I get up every morning and look forward to getting in there and diving every day. Sure, you're not real wrapped on jumping in the cold water, and you're not wrapped in sitting in the chamber decompressing for an hour or more. But if I could do this for a living every day, I'd be a very happy man.
This nifty little remote-piloted vehicle doesn't feel the cold, doesn't need to get bored sitting in a decompression chamber, and works overtime without pay. They call it R2-D2, of course.
Lower away when you're ready.
It's controlled from the surface, and if it had to, it could go down to 2,000 feet. R2-D2 disappears from sight, but takes a set of eyes down with him. Swims down to the ship and along the hull. And sets about his job of reading gauges and relaying essential information to the surface 24 hours a day. After nearly 2 months of preparation, the oil is ready to be pumped. The tanker Pacific Explorer arrives from Fiji. Some of the part-empty tanks have volumes of air trapped at tremendous pressure. The oil from the full tanks is even more of a headache when you're trying to fit valves to them. The wreck of the Lermontov affected everyone in this isolated district. Many of them were involved in the rescue, and providing services and backup for the salvage team has brought a welcome injection of cash. They followed the operation's progress closely. Now it builds to a climax. Hydraulic and air-powered submersible pumps are linked up, and the oil's ready to go.
Okay, we'll have to get it on clip quick. When we tilt it, we want to get it on straight, okay?
Watch the beam, right? Come this way. Right.
You ready to take oil?
Oh, that's
You open the valves. Pumping now. Anything coming out?
Yep. Oil. He can feel it pumping. There's no vacuum at this stage.
I realise that. We might get quite a while before we get a vacuum.
Yeah, roger that.
He's on top of the hull, isn't he?
That's correct, yes, he's on the hull.
Roger, keep an eye on his time because he might have to sit there for quite a while.
He's got 3 minutes to go. That makes his time 50 minutes at 110 feet. He then has a water stop of 8 minutes.
At 20 feet and 26 at 10 feet.
Straight oil.
If he goes through to 60, he has 80
Straight oil.
at 20 feet and 26 at 10 feet.
Malcolm, I haven't been able to listen to that. Stand by one. We're going to stop for a minute and change the position.
Correct.
Stop it.
Roger.
Pure oil.
We're going to change position.
Yeah. We're going to change over. We have pure oil. We're going to go straight in the tank. I've got the relay hoses. It'll take a few minutes. You copy that, Malcolm?
Roger, Joe. I'll just inform him that you're changing hoses. Stand by. Diver 2, Joe is changing hoses up top. Joe's changing hoses up top.
Right, we're pumping oil. We're pumping oil. Here she comes. We're pumping oil. We're pumping oil. We're pumping oil.
The diver's mission's complete, but there's still 20,000 tons of Mikhail Lermontov down there. So now what?
I'm the chairman of the Marlborough Harbour Board, and under the Harbours Regulations 208, the board can require the removal of the vessel Mikhail Lermontov, which is sunk in Harbour Board waters. If the owners were to abandon the ship, then the board itself could undertake the work and charge the owners accordingly. But I would remind you of the costs involved in removing the Wahine some 10 years ago, when it was between $10 and $20 million. The board, having incurred such a cost, would then recover those costs in a court, but of course it would have to collect the money in Russia.
But there's really no need to shift the Lermontov. She's not a hazard to shipping. Cutting the wreck up for razor blades would cost more than the scrap was worth. The bronze propellers will be worth salvaging, and there's still 2 more ship safes on board. Sports divers are already picking the bones, but it's hazardous. Almost certainly amateur divers will lose their lives on the wreck, and any goodies they find still belong to their original owners. There's one other remote but hugely expensive possibility. The once proud luxury cruise ship, the Mikhail Lermontov, could yet be raised and put back into Russian service.
Gene, I'm working with the consortium who are involved with the removal of the oil from the Mikhail Lermontov, and several of our divers have been exploring, looking for oil that may have leaked out of tanks and is now, you know, stuck up in the deck head and in the public spaces. And one of our divers came up and sort of, you know, gave this little thing to me and sort of said, gee, I wonder...
Oh, I don't believe it.
Precious pieces in there.
Oh, no, it's my jewellery.
And perhaps you might even recognise some of this gold here with the coin.
Oh, look at my watch.
Small things that that come to light when they're swimming around.
Pearls, no pearls.
And tell me, were they a normal pearl colour?
Yes, they were.
And they have.
Yes,
They've changed completely to that black colour. That's rather interesting. And I would suggest would make them rather unique as well. Swimming around in there are all sorts of strange things, and we perhaps might... The other half is obviously drifting around in the cabin there, and I'm sure there's still many a good wear in that one. And of course, you know, as goes with that, of course. Just so you can still go snorkeling on the reef on the cruise, although perhaps not on this one. So
I can't believe this. I think
unbelievable.
The 2 rings.
Out of her cabin.
One for my mother and one for my husband. I think they're the 2 most precious things.